Juliana Foster signed her name on the marriage certificate with shaking hands, knowing her family would rather see her dead than free. The courthouse smelled like dust and lemon cleaner, the fluorescent lights humming overhead as the clerk stamped the papers with mechanical efficiency. Beside her stood Vincent Ravenshaw, the man she'd met only 3 weeks ago in the cramped break room of the diner where she worked double shifts. He wore the same faded jacket he always did, his white hair falling into pale eyes that had looked at her with something she'd never seen before, genuine kindness without expectation. "Congratulations," the clerk said flatly, sliding the certificate across the counter. Vincent took it carefully, folding it into his inner pocket. His fingers were cold when they brushed hers, but Juliana didn't pull away. Cold hands were nothing compared to her father's fists or her stepmother's calculated cruelty. Cold hands were nothing compared to the arranged marriage they'd planned for her, a business transaction with a man 3 times her age who'd looked at her like she was merchandise. "Thank you," Vincent said quietly, his voice carrying an accent Juliana couldn't quite place. European, maybe. Old-fashioned in the way he chose his words. They stepped out into the gray afternoon, rain beginning to spatter the sidewalk. Juliana pulled her thin cardigan tighter around herself. Everything she owned fit into the battered backpack slung over one shoulder. 23 years old and running with nothing but the clothes on her back and a marriage certificate to a man who claimed he could offer her safety. "Are you certain about this?" Vincent asked, turning to face her. His pale skin seemed to glow in the dim light, his white hair plastered to his forehead by the rain. He was beautiful in an otherworldly way that had made her coworkers whisper when he'd first started coming into the diner, always ordering black coffee and watching the door like he expected trouble. "I'm certain," Juliana said firmly. "My family will come looking for me. They'll use the police, private investigators, everything. But they can't force me to leave my legal husband. It's the only loophole they can't touch." Vincent's expression flickered with something that might have been pain or perhaps regret. "You understand this is a marriage in name only. I'm offering you protection and a place to stay, nothing more. I cannot ask anything of you." "I know." Juliana had made that clear from the beginning. She wasn't looking for romance or passion. She was looking for survival. Vincent had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known how to voice, a quiet man who kept to himself, who had money despite his modest appearance, who had looked at her bruised wrist one evening and said, "You deserve better than this." When she'd explained her situation in desperate, halting sentences during her break, he'd listened without interruption. Then he'd made an offer that seemed insane. Marry him for protection, live in his home safely, no strings attached. He'd been a regular for months. Always polite, always generous with tips, never inappropriate. She'd taken the leap because she was out of options and out of time. They walked through the rain to a black car parked 2 streets away, not the beaten-up sedan she'd expected, but a sleek vehicle that looked expensive even to her untrained eye. Vincent opened the passenger door for her, old-fashioned manners that would have made her smile under different circumstances. The interior smelled like leather and something else, something crisp and clean like winter air. Vincent slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, the car purring to life with barely a sound. "Where do you live?" Juliana asked as they pulled into traffic. She realized she'd married a man whose address she didn't even know. "The historic district," Vincent said, "near Cathedral Square." Juliana's heart sank. That was the most expensive area of the city, where old mansions stood behind iron gates and security systems. "Vincent, I can't if you're spending money you don't have." "I have money," he interrupted gently. "I've had a very long time to accumulate it." Something about the way he said it made her look at him more carefully. His profile was sharp and elegant, his skin so pale it seemed translucent. She'd assumed he was albino, but now she noticed details she'd overlooked before, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel with perfect stillness, the way he didn't seem to breathe quite right, the way his eyes tracked movement with predatory precision. "How old are you?" she asked suddenly. Vincent's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. "Much older than I look." They drove in silence through winding streets, the rain growing heavier. The city transformed around them from modern commercial blocks to older neighborhoods where buildings stood shoulder to shoulder like elderly sentries. Finally, they turned down a private road, lined with ancient oak trees, their branches forming a canopy overhead. The house at the end of the drive made Juliana's breath catch. It wasn't a house, it was a mansion, 3 stories of dark stone with arched windows and a tower that reached toward the gray sky. Gothic architecture that belonged in a European countryside, not nestled in the heart of an American city. "Vincent," she whispered, "what exactly do you do for a living?" I manage properties, he said, which wasn't technically a lie. I've been in real estate for a very long time. He parked in front of massive wooden doors that looked like they'd survived centuries. When they stepped out, Juliana noticed there were no other cars, no signs of other people. The mansion stood alone on what must have been several acres of private land. Vincent produced an old-fashioned key and unlocked the door, pushing it open to reveal an entrance hall that took her breath away. A grand staircase curved upward, the banister carved from dark wood that gleamed in the low light. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their crystals catching what little gray daylight filtered through tall windows. The floor was marble, covered with rich carpets that muffled their footsteps. "This is impossible," Juliana said faintly. "You can't afford this working in real estate. Nobody can afford this." Vincent closed the door behind them and turned to face her, his expression serious. "Juliana, I need to tell you something. I need you to listen carefully and try not to be afraid." Her heart began to pound. This was where the fairy tale ended, where the prince became the monster. She'd been so desperate to escape her family that she'd walked straight into something worse. Her hand tightened on her backpack strap, calculating how far she'd get if she ran. "I'm not human," Vincent said quietly. "I'm a vampire. I have been for nearly 800 years. Juliana stared at him. Then she laughed, a sharp sound edged with hysteria. "That's not funny. I'm not joking." He took a step closer, and suddenly his movements were different, too fluid, too graceful, impossibly fast. "I should have told you before, but I feared you wouldn't agree to the marriage. I feared you'd go back to your family rather than trust a monster." "Vampires aren't real," Juliana said, but her voice shook. She was thinking of all the strange details, his coldness, his paleness, the way he only came to the diner after sunset, the way he never ate, only drank black coffee. "We're very real," Vincent said. "And I'm not just any vampire. I'm the vampire king of this city. I own most of the historic district, several businesses, and I maintain the peace between the vampire courts and the human world. This city belongs to me in ways the human government doesn't even understand." Juliana's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the marble floor, her backpack falling beside her. "This is insane. This is completely insane." Vincent knelt in front of her, careful to keep his distance. "I won't hurt you. I've never hurt a human who didn't deserve it. I only feed from volunteers at establishments designed for that purpose, blood banks run by vampires who compensate donors generously. I follow the old laws strictly. I offered you marriage because I could sense your desperation and because—" He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. "Because I've watched you for months, and I've seen your kindness, your strength, your determination to survive. I wanted to help." "By tricking me into marrying the vampire king," Juliana said numbly. "By offering you protection that your family cannot penetrate," Vincent corrected. "As my wife, you're under the protection of vampire law as well as human law. No one can touch you without answering to me. And in this city, answering to me means death." Juliana pressed her hands to her face, trying to process information that couldn't be real but felt terrifyingly genuine. "Prove it," she whispered. "Prove you're a vampire." Vincent hesitated, then opened his mouth. His canines lengthened into fangs, sharp and white and deadly. His eyes shifted from pale blue to a deep crimson that glowed in the shadows. For a moment he looked like a creature from nightmares, beautiful and terrible and utterly inhuman. Then he blinked, and he was Vincent again, white-haired and pale-skinned and almost gentle. "Oh my God," Juliana breathed. "Oh my God, vampires are real, yes, and you're their king. In this city, yes. There are other kings and queens in other territories, but this is my domain." Juliana started laughing again, tears streaming down her face. "I escaped my abusive family by accidentally marrying the vampire king. This is the most insane thing that's ever happened to me." Vincent's expression softened with something that might have been sympathy. "You're taking this better than most humans would." "I'm not taking it well, I'm losing my mind," Juliana said, but she was already thinking through the implications. If Vincent was telling the truth, and God help her, she believed him, then she was safer than she'd ever dared hope. What could her father do against a vampire? What could her stepmother's schemes accomplish against a creature who'd survived 8 centuries? "Will you stay?" Vincent asked quietly. "I understand if you want to leave. I can arrange for other protection, a new identity, money to start somewhere far from here." Juliana looked at him, really looked at him. He was a monster, a predator, something that shouldn't exist. But he was also the man who'd tipped 50% at a diner, who'd listened to her problems without judgment, who'd offered her a way out when no one else would. "I'll stay," she said. "We made a deal. And honestly, a vampire king who keeps his word is better than the family I was born into." Vincent's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you. I'll show you to your room. You'll have your own space, your own key, complete privacy." The house is yours to explore, though I'd recommend staying away from the lower levels. Without me, there are older vampires in residence who aren't accustomed to humans." "There are more of you here?" Juliana asked, struggling to her feet. "A few. My court, such as it is. They're loyal and they'll follow my orders to protect you. But they're still vampires. It's best to be cautious." He led her up the grand staircase to the second floor, down a hallway lined with portraits of people in ancient clothing. Vampires, Juliana realized, preserved forever in paint. Vincent stopped at a door and opened it to reveal a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment had been. The furniture was antique but immaculate, a four-poster bed with deep blue curtains, a wardrobe that looked hand-carved, a writing desk by the window, and a door that led to a private bathroom with a clawfoot tub. "It's beautiful," Juliana whispered. "It was my sister's room centuries ago," Vincent said softly. "She'd be happy to know it's being used again by someone worthy of it." "What happened to her?" "Vampire politics. A war between courts. She was killed to hurt me." His voice was carefully neutral, but Juliana could hear the old pain beneath it. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. Vincent nodded once, then stepped back into the hallway. "Rest. There's clothing in the wardrobe that should fit. I had staff prepare the room when you agreed to marry me. We'll talk more this evening." He was gone before Juliana could respond, moving with that impossible vampire speed. She closed the door and leaned against it, sliding down to sit on the plush carpet. She'd escaped her family by marrying a vampire, the Vampire King, the creature who owned the city. She started laughing again, but this time it wasn't hysteria. It was relief, because for the first time in her life she felt safe. The evening came quietly, the rain pattering against the windows as Juliana explored her new room. The wardrobe did indeed contain clothing, modern pieces that looked expensive but practical, all in her size. Someone had also stocked the bathroom with toiletries and towels so soft they felt like clouds. She took a long bath, her first in years, without fear that her father would pound on the door or her stepmother would time her for wasting water. The hot water soaked away layers of tension she'd been carrying, so long she'd forgotten what relaxation felt like. When she emerged in clean clothes, dark jeans, and a soft gray sweater, she found a note slipped under her door in elegant handwriting. "Dinner in the dining room if you're comfortable joining us. No obligation." Juliana's stomach growled, reminding her that she'd been too nervous to eat before the wedding. She followed the hallway back to the grand staircase, then realized she had no idea where the dining room was. Lost little human? She spun to find a woman leaning against the banister. No, not a woman. A vampire. She had the same white pale skin and hair, though hers fell in waves to her waist. Her eyes were amber, sharp with intelligence and something that might have been amusement. She wore modern clothing, black leather pants and a silk blouse, but carried herself like ancient royalty. "I'm looking for the dining room," Juliana said, trying to keep her voice steady. The vampire tilted her head, the gesture oddly bird-like. "You're the king's new human wife, the one he married to protect from her mortal family." "How deliciously romantic." "It's not romantic. It's practical," Juliana said. The vampire laughed, a sound like crystal bells. "Oh, you poor naive creature. Nothing Vincent does is purely practical. He's been obsessed with you for months, watching you through the diner windows like a lovesick boy. We've all heard about the brave little waitress who smiled through her bruises." Heat flooded Juliana's cheeks. "He felt sorry for me. Vincent Ravenshaw doesn't feel sorry for anyone. He's the Vampire King, not a charity service." The vampire pushed off the banister and glided closer, moving with that same impossible grace. "I'm Serafina Duval, by the way, First Lieutenant of the King's Court. We're going to be very close, you and I, whether you like it or not." "Why?" Juliana asked warily. "Because you're under my protection now, too. Any vampire who touches you answers to me first, then to Vincent. And I'm much less merciful than he is." Serafina's smile showed fangs. "Come, I'll take you to dinner." The king doesn't like to be kept waiting, though he'd never admit it. She led Juliana through a maze of hallways to a dining room that could have hosted 50 people easily. A long table dominated the center, covered with a white cloth and set with silver and crystal. Vincent sat at the head and two other vampires occupied seats nearby, both men, both with that same white hair and pale skin, both watching Juliana with undisguised curiosity. "Juliana," Vincent said, standing immediately, "I'm glad you came. Please sit." Serafina guided her to a seat near Vincent, then took her own place across the table. A moment later, human servants appeared carrying plates of food, real food, elaborately prepared and still steaming. "You don't eat?" Juliana asked, noticing that only she had a plate. "We can consume food, but it provides no nourishment," Vincent explained. "We eat occasionally for the pleasure of taste, but blood is all we truly need." One of the male vampires leaned forward. "I'm Casimir Noir, captain of the King's Guard. The brooding one next to me is Dominic Sharp, Master of Intelligence. Dominic inclined his head slightly, his dark eyes assessing. You've caused quite a stir in the vampire community. Mrs. Ravenshaw, the king hasn't taken a consort in nearly 500 years. I'm not a consort, Juliana said quickly. This is a practical arrangement. All three vampires exchanged glances that clearly said they didn't believe her. Eat, Vincent said gently. You must be starving. The food was incredible: roasted chicken with herbs, vegetables that melted on her tongue, bread that tasted freshly baked. Juliana ate while the vampires discussed city business in careful terms, clearly editing their conversation for her human ears. The Grimaldi family is pushing territory boundaries again, Casimir said. They claim the warehouse district should fall under their jurisdiction. The warehouse district has been neutral ground for a century, Vincent said, his voice carrying an edge of authority that made even the other vampires straighten. They know this. They're testing me. Because of the human, Dominic said, looking at Juliana. They think you're distracted, weak. Vincent's eyes flashed red for a brief second. Then they'll learn otherwise. What are the Grimaldi family? Juliana asked, unable to stay silent. Another vampire court, Serafina explained. Less powerful than ours, but ambitious. They've been trying to expand their territory for decades. Vincent has kept them contained through a combination of diplomacy and strategic demonstrations of force. Vampires have territories, like gangs, like kingdoms, Vincent corrected. We're old creatures, Juliana. We remember when the world was divided into empires and dynasties. We never stopped thinking that way. This city is mine because I claimed it 300 years ago and have held it ever since. Other vampires respect that claim or face the consequences. Juliana set down her fork, her appetite fading. So I've married into vampire politics. You've married the most powerful vampire in 600 miles, Casimir said cheerfully. You're probably the safest human in the entire country, unless someone decides to use her against the king, Dominic added darkly. Vincent's hand slammed down on the table, making the crystal ring. No one will touch her. I've made that abundantly clear to every vampire in my territory. Juliana is under my personal protection, and harming her means war. The room fell silent. Juliana could feel the weight of Vincent's power pressing against her, like a physical force. This was the vampire king. She realized, not the gentleman who'd bought her coffee, but the ancient predator who'd survived centuries through strength and ruthlessness. I'm going to bed, she said quietly, standing. Thank you for dinner. Vincent rose immediately. I'll walk you back. I can find my own way. Please. His voice softened. I'd feel better knowing you're safely settled. She couldn't argue with that. Not when she was still learning the layout of this impossible mansion. They walked in silence through the hallways, the sounds of the other vampires fading behind them. I'm sorry, Vincent said as they reached her door. This is a lot to absorb in one day. Marrying a stranger would be difficult enough without adding vampire politics. You should have told me before, Juliana said, but there was no real anger in her voice. About what you are, would you have believed me? No, she admitted. And I was desperate enough that I might have married you anyway, which says terrible things about my survival instincts. Vincent's expression flickered with something that might have been amusement or sadness. Your survival instincts are excellent. You recognized that I could protect you, and you were right. I will protect you, Juliana. From your family, from vampire politics, from anything that threatens you. Why? She asked. What did Serafina mean when she said you've been obsessed with me? He looked away, and for a moment he seemed almost human in his discomfort. I don't expect you to understand. I'm not sure I understand it myself. But from the first time I saw you serving coffee with kindness despite your exhaustion, smiling at customers despite the bruises you tried to hide, I felt something I haven't felt in centuries. A desire to protect, to care for someone beyond political necessity. You felt sorry for me, Juliana said again, but her heart was beating faster. I felt drawn to you, Vincent corrected. Your strength, your resilience, your refusal to let cruelty destroy your fundamental kindness. Those are rare qualities in any era. I wanted to know you. He paused. I wanted to give you the safety you deserved. Juliana's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. No one's ever wanted to protect me before. Not without expecting something in return. I expect nothing, Vincent said firmly. This marriage is real in the eyes of the law, but you owe me nothing beyond that. You're free to live your life however you choose, within the safety of these walls. And if I wanted more? The words escaped before Juliana could stop them, surprising them both. Vincent went very still. More? I don't know, she said honestly. This is overwhelming and terrifying and insane. But you've shown me more genuine care in 3 weeks than my family did in 23 years. And Serafina's right, this is romantic, in a gothic, impossible sort of way. The vampire king saving the desperate girl. I'm not a hero from a story, Vincent warned. I'm a creature who's done terrible things to survive and maintain power. I've killed Juliana. I've made choices that would horrify you. My father beat me unconscious when I was 16 because I refused to quit school, Juliana said flatly. My stepmother poisoned my food to keep me weak and controllable. They were planning to sell me to a man who's known for abusing his wives. I'm not looking for perfection, Vincent. I'm looking for someone who sees me as a person instead of a possession. Something blazed in Vincent's eyes, there and gone too fast to name. You're a person, a remarkable person. And if you ever want more than protection, if you ever want to explore what this marriage could become, I would be honored. He said it formally, like an old-world knight pledging service to his lady. It should have been ridiculous, but instead it made Juliana's heart ache with something she was afraid to name. I need time, she whispered, to adjust, to understand this world, to figure out who I am when I'm not just surviving. You have all the time you need, Vincent promised. Immortality gives me patience. He left her then, disappearing down the hallway with that supernatural speed. Juliana went into her room and locked the door, then stood at the window looking out at the rain-soaked grounds. She'd married a vampire to escape her family. But maybe, just maybe, she'd found something more than escape. The days developed into a strange new rhythm. Juliana woke when she pleased, ate meals prepared by the human staff who worked for Vincent's household, and explored the mansion with careful curiosity. The building was enormous, filled with centuries of accumulated treasures, paintings, and sculptures. Libraries containing books in dozens of languages, rooms furnished with antiques that belonged in museums. Vincent was often absent during the day, sleeping in whatever secure location vampires rested. But at night he sought her out, sometimes in the library where she'd discovered a love of reading without interruption, sometimes in the music room where a grand piano sat unused. "Do you play?" Vincent asked one evening, finding her staring at the instrument. "No. My family said music was a waste of time." Juliana touched the keys gently, producing a discordant note. "Would you like to learn?" She looked at him in surprise. "You'd teach me?" "I've had centuries to master various instruments. It would be my pleasure." He sat on the bench and gestured for her to join him. Juliana hesitated, then sat beside him, careful to maintain space between them. Vincent's hands moved over the keys, and suddenly the room filled with music so beautiful it brought tears to her eyes. He played with perfect technical skill, but also with emotion, each note carrying weight and meaning. When he finished, the silence felt heavy. "That was incredible," Juliana breathed. "That was Mozart, composed when he was still alive and I was merely 300 years old," Vincent said. "Music was different then, everything was different. Do you miss it, your original time?" Vincent considered the question carefully. "I miss certain aspects. The formality, the slower pace, the certainty of social structures. But I don't miss the disease, the violence, the constant wars. Every era has its advantages and drawbacks. I've learned to adapt." 800 years of adapting, Juliana said, trying to wrap her mind around it. "I can't even imagine. It becomes normal, though lonely. Watching generations pass, forming connections only to lose them to time." His voice carried old pain. "That's why many vampires become cold, cruel. It's easier than caring about creatures who'll be gone in the blink of an eye. But you're not cold or cruel." "I've had my moments," Vincent said darkly. "I've done things I regret, things necessary to maintain power and protect those under my rule. Immortality doesn't make one moral. It just provides more time to grapple with morality's complexities." Juliana studied his profile, the elegant lines of his face that would never age, never change. "Teach me something simple, on the piano." His expression softened. "Give me your hands." She placed her hands in his, and he guided them to the keys, positioning her fingers carefully. His touch was cool but not unpleasant, gentle despite the supernatural strength she knew he possessed. "This is middle C," he explained, pressing her finger down. "Build from here." They spent an hour on basic scales, Vincent patient as she fumbled through the notes. When she finally managed a simple melody without mistakes, he smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually serious face into something almost boyish. "Beautifully done," he said. Juliana felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the music. "Thank you for this. For all of this. It's my pleasure to watch you discover joy," Vincent said quietly. "You've spent so long merely surviving. You deserve to live." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Juliana pulled her hands back, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting. "I should rest," she said. "It's late." "Of course." Vincent stood immediately, giving her space. "Sleep well, Juliana." She fled to her room with her heart pounding, confused by the feelings stirring inside her. She'd married him for protection, for legal safety from her family. But the more time she spent with Vincent, the more she saw beneath the vampire king facade to the lonely, thoughtful man underneath. It would be so easy to fall for him, and so dangerous. The following week brought Juliana's first real test. She was reading in the library when Serafina appeared, moving with that liquid grace vampires possessed. "You have visitors," the vampire announced. Juliana's blood ran cold. "My family? Not quite. Human lawyers claiming to represent the Foster family interests. They're demanding to see you, citing concern for your welfare." Serafina's smile was sharp. "Vincent is handling them currently, but he thought you might want to be present." Juliana set down her book with shaking hands. "Where?" "The front parlor. Follow me." They descended to the first floor where voices echoed from a formal sitting room. Juliana entered to find Vincent facing two men in expensive suits, his posture radiating controlled menace despite his casual clothing. "No legal grounds to hold her against her will," one lawyer was saying. "She's not being held. She's living with her legal husband." Vincent's voice was silk over steel. "If you have concerns, you may address them to Mrs. Ravenshaw directly." Both lawyers turned as Juliana entered, their expressions shifting from professional concern to calculation. She recognized that look, her father's lawyers, men who'd helped facilitate his various illegal activities. "Miss Foster," the first one began. "Mrs. Ravenshaw," Juliana corrected firmly. "I'm married now. Yes, we've heard about your hasty marriage. Your father is concerned that you were coerced or threatened into this arrangement." Juliana laughed bitterly. "My father is concerned that he lost his punching bag and his bargaining chip. Tell him I'm never coming back." "You're clearly under duress." "She's clearly nothing of the sort," Vincent interrupted. "My wife is free to leave at any time. She chooses to stay. If you have legal documents requiring her attention, present them now. Otherwise, this meeting is over." The second lawyer produced a sheaf of papers. "This is a petition for annulment based on fraud and coercion. Your father is prepared to file unless you return home immediately." "Let him file," Juliana said, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. "I married Vincent of my own free will to escape an abusive household. I have medical records documenting years of injuries. I have witness statements from coworkers. If my father wants to go to court, I'll be happy to share everything with a judge." The lawyers exchanged glances. "Your father also wanted us to remind you that you're still in possession of certain family documents that belong to him." "I have nothing of his except trauma," Juliana shot back. "He believes otherwise. He's willing to forget the annulment if you return what belongs to the family." Understanding crashed over Juliana like cold water. "The ledgers. He thinks I took his financial ledgers." She had, actually. On her last night in her father's house, she'd found the hidden ledgers documenting his money laundering and tax evasion. She'd photographed every page with her phone before fleeing, insurance against him coming after her. But she'd never mentioned it to anyone. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied. "Miss Foster, Mrs. Ravenshaw," Vincent corrected, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "And I believe we're done here. My wife has made her position clear. Relay to Mr. Foster that any further harassment will be met with legal action. And perhaps mention that I own this city in ways he cannot begin to understand. It would be very unfortunate if his business interests were to encounter unexpected difficulties." The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. The lawyers gathered their papers quickly, suddenly eager to leave. "We'll relay your message," the first one said stiffly. Serafina appeared to escort them out, her smile predatory. When the door closed behind them, Juliana's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the antique sofa, adrenaline draining away to leave her shaking. Vincent knelt in front of her immediately. "Are you all right?" "I have evidence," she whispered, "of my father's crimes. Financial records proving money laundering, tax evasion, fraud. I photographed them before I left, just in case. He must have realized they're missing." Vincent's expression turned calculating. "Do you still have the photographs on my phone? I was going to delete them, but..." She pulled out her phone with trembling hands. "I thought maybe if things got bad, I could use them as leverage. May I see?" Juliana unlocked her phone and pulled up the photographs, handing the device to Vincent. He scrolled through them slowly, his expression growing darker. "This is extensive," he said finally. "This isn't just personal tax evasion. This is organized crime, shell corporations, links to several criminal enterprises I recognize." He looked up at her with new respect. "Your father isn't just abusive, he's dangerous." "I know," Juliana said miserably. "That's why I was so desperate to escape. He wouldn't have let me go willingly. I know too much about his business, even if I never wanted to." Vincent was silent for a long moment, his mind clearly working through implications and possibilities. Then he handed back her phone and said, "We need to handle this carefully. Your father will escalate if he believes you're a threat. What do we do?" We make him understand that you're protected by forces he cannot fight." Vincent stood and offered her his hand. "Come with me, there's someone you need to meet." He led her through the mansion to a part she'd never explored, downstairs that descended into darkness, through corridors lit by ancient lanterns. The temperature dropped with each step until Juliana could see her breath. "Where are we going?" she asked nervously. "The true heart of my territory," Vincent said. "The vampire court." They emerged into a vast underground chamber that took Juliana's breath away. It was a throne room out of Gothic fantasy, vaulted ceilings carved with intricate designs, columns rising like stone trees, and at the far end a throne of black marble that seemed to absorb light. Vampires filled the space, dozens of them, all turning to watch as Vincent entered with his human wife. The air thrummed with power and danger. "My people," Vincent said, his voice carrying through the chamber with supernatural resonance. "You know Juliana Ravenshaw, my wife and consort. Her human family seeks to harm her, to reclaim her through threats and coercion. I declare now before all of you that any action taken against my wife is an action taken against me personally." The vampires shifted, whispers running through the crowd. "Furthermore," Vincent continued, "any vampire who aids the Foster family, directly or indirectly, will be considered a traitor to this court and dealt with accordingly." A figure stepped forward from the shadows, a vampire who looked ancient even by their standards, his white hair long and wild, his eyes fierce. "You risk much for a human, my king." "I risk nothing," Vincent said calmly. "I'm simply making my position clear. Juliana is under my protection. That should be enough." The ancient vampire looked at Juliana with unsettling intensity. "And what does the human bride offer in return for such comprehensive protection?" "She offers nothing because I demand nothing," Vincent said, and now his voice carried a sharp edge. "She's my wife. That alone makes her valuable beyond measure." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the assembled vampires. Juliana realized this was political theater. Vincent was establishing her status in ways the vampire community would understand and respect. The ancient vampire bowed slowly. "As you say, my king. We hear and we obey." One by one, the other vampires bowed or inclined their heads, acknowledging Vincent's declaration. When the last one had shown deference, Vincent took Juliana's hand and led her back through the corridors to the upper mansion. "What just happened?" she asked when they were alone again. "I made you effectively untouchable in the vampire world," Vincent explained. "No vampire in this city will help your father now, and most will actively work against him if he threatens you. Your father's lawyers, his hired investigators, even his criminal contacts, if they interact with any vampires, they'll find themselves facing resistance. You did that for me? I told you I would protect you." Vincent stopped, turning to face her in the dim corridor. "But I should tell you the full implications. By making such a public declaration, I've tied your status directly to my authority as king. In vampire society, that's essentially declaring you not just my wife, but my true consort, my partner in power. What does that mean?" Juliana's heart was racing. "It means the vampire world now sees you as queen," Vincent said quietly. "It means your safety is paramount, but also that your actions reflect on me. It means," he paused, "it means I've made our marriage real in ways beyond human law." Juliana should have been angry at the presumption. Instead, she felt a strange flutter of something that might have been hope. "You could have warned me before bringing me to that throne room. Would you have refused?" "I don't know," she admitted. "This is all happening so fast. 3 weeks ago I was serving coffee and hiding bruises. Now I'm supposedly the vampire queen of the city." "You don't have to be anything you don't want to be," Vincent said quickly. "The title is symbolic, a political protection. You can continue living as you have been, exploring the mansion, learning piano, reading. Nothing has to change." "Everything's already changed," Juliana said. She reached out tentatively and touched his cheek, his skin cool beneath her fingertips. "You changed everything." Vincent went utterly still beneath her touch, his eyes flaring crimson for a heartbeat before he controlled himself. "Juliana, I'm not afraid of you," she whispered. "I should be, but I'm not. You're the most dangerous thing I've ever encountered, and you're the only person who's ever made me feel safe." "I don't want you to feel obligated." "I don't," she interrupted. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. This started as a practical arrangement, but it's becoming something else. Something I didn't expect but don't want to lose." Vincent caught her hand, holding it gently against his face. "I've existed for 8 centuries, he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've seen empires rise and fall. I've loved and lost and taught myself not to feel too deeply. But you've undone 800 years of careful control in 3 weeks. Is that a bad thing?" Juliana asked. "It's terrifying," Vincent admitted, "but also wonderful. You make me remember what it was like to be human, to hope and dream and fear losing something precious." They stood in the shadowed corridor connected by touch and shared vulnerability. Then Juliana rose on her toes and kissed him gently, a question and an answer all at once. Vincent's arms came around her carefully, like she was something breakable and infinitely valuable. The kiss deepened and Juliana felt the coolness of his skin, the supernatural strength held in rigid check, the desperate care he took not to hurt her. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, Vincent from emotion rather than need for air. "I want this to be real," Juliana said. "Not just political theater or protective pretense. I want to know you, all of you, and I want you to know me." "Are you certain?" Vincent asked. "I'm not human, Juliana. I can't give you a normal life, children growing old together. I can offer you centuries if you choose to be turned eventually, but I won't pressure you toward that decision. I can only offer you myself, a vampire king with blood on his hands and a heart I thought I'd lost long ago." "I don't want normal," Juliana said. "Normal was being beaten and controlled and treated like property. You offer me choice, respect, safety, and the possibility of love. That's more than I ever dreamed of having." Vincent pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "Then I'm yours for as long as you'll have me. Every dark corner of my soul, every terrible choice I've made, every ounce of power I command. Yours." They held each other in the shadows while the mansion settled around them, and Juliana felt something broken inside her begin to heal. The next 2 months passed in a blur of discovery and deepening connection. Juliana learned the rhythms of Vincent's world, sleeping during the day when he had to rest, staying awake through the night when he was most alive. She met more members of his court, learning the complex politics that kept the vampire world hidden from humanity. She also began to understand the full scope of Vincent's power. He owned dozens of properties throughout the city, controlled multiple businesses, and maintained a network of information that would make intelligence agencies jealous. He was wealthy beyond measure, powerful beyond comprehension, and he used both to maintain a careful balance between the vampire and human worlds. "Most humans never realize we exist," Dominic explained one evening as they sat in Vincent's study. "We've become very good at hiding, at blending in. The ones who do find out either join us, work for us, or," he shrugged meaningfully, "or die," Juliana finished flatly. "Usually," Dominic admitted, "though Vincent has always been more lenient than other vampire kings. He believes in coexistence when possible." Vincent looked up from the documents he was reviewing. "Killing humans attracts attention. Attention brings hunters, researchers, military involvement. It's much simpler to maintain secrecy through careful management and selective memory alteration." "Memory alteration?" Juliana asked. "An ability some older vampires possess," Vincent said. "The power to cloud minds, erase specific memories, implant suggestions. I have it, though I use it sparingly. Have you ever used it on me?" "Never," Vincent said firmly, meeting her eyes. "I swore I wouldn't. Your mind, your memories, your thoughts, they're yours alone. I won't violate that, no matter the circumstances." Juliana believed him. Vincent had proven himself trustworthy in dozens of small ways over the past weeks. He kept his promises, respected her boundaries, and never pushed for more than she was willing to give. But she found herself wanting to give more. They spent hours together each night playing piano, reading in the library, talking about history and philosophy, and the strange experience of loving someone across species lines. Because it was love, Juliana realized. She'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with the Vampire King. "Tell me about the day you were turned," she said one evening as they sat in his private chambers rooms she'd been invited to, after weeks of careful courtship. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fireplace. He kept fires burning at night for her comfort, even though he needed no warmth. "It was 1247, he finally said. "I was a minor nobleman, youngest son of a family with more titles than money. I'd been sent to negotiate with a powerful lord about a marriage alliance for my sister." His expression darkened. "The lord was vampire, though I didn't know. He was offended by some imagined slight and decided to punish my family by turning me into a monster." "Vincent, let me finish," he said gently. "I was 26 years old, full of pride and ambition and certainty that I understood the world. The vampire who turned me left me to suffer through the transformation alone, expecting me to die or go mad. Most fledgling vampires do without guidance, but you survived. I survived through rage and determination. I taught myself control through trial and bloody error. I learned the vampire world's rules, its hierarchies, its power structures, and I swore that no one would ever have that kind of absolute power over me again." He looked at her. "So I became powerful myself. I conquered territories, built alliances, destroyed enemies. I became the thing I'd once feared, but I tried to be different, more merciful, more just." "You succeeded," Juliana said. "Your people respect you, even love you. That doesn't happen through fear alone, perhaps." Vincent reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. But I've done terrible things to maintain that power, Juliana. I've killed innocents who were simply in the wrong place. I've made political marriages before cold arrangements that benefited my territory but meant nothing emotionally. I've lived so long that morality became flexible, negotiable. You're trying to scare me away, Juliana realized. I'm trying to be honest. You deserve to know who you've bound yourself to. Juliana took his cool hand in both of hers. I know who you are. You're the man who saw a desperate waitress and offered help without expectation. You're the king who protects his people instead of exploiting them. You're the vampire who's given me more choice and freedom than any human in my life. I know you've done dark things. I don't care. We're all surviving the best we know how. Vincent's control cracked. He pulled her into his arms, holding her with desperate intensity. I don't deserve you, he breathed against her hair. Good thing I don't care about what you deserve, Juliana said, then kissed him with all the love and certainty she felt. They made love that night, Vincent careful and reverent, treating her like something sacred. Afterward, lying in his bed with his arms around her, Juliana felt more complete than she'd ever thought possible. I want forever with you, Vincent whispered in the darkness. But I won't ask you to become vampire, not yet. That's a choice you need to make freely without pressure. What if I want to? Juliana asked. What if I want centuries with you? Then we'll discuss it when you're absolutely certain. Being turned isn't romantic or easy, Juliana. It's death and rebirth, pain and transformation. I won't let you make that choice in the heat of new love. She nodded against his chest, understanding his caution even as she felt certain of her answer. But she could wait. They had time. The illusion of safety shattered 3 weeks later. Juliana was in the library alone. Vincent was meeting with another vampire lord in neutral territory. Serafina was patrolling the grounds, and the mansion felt quiet and peaceful. She was deep into a history book when she heard glass breaking. She looked up just as 3 men burst into the library, all wearing masks and carrying weapons. Professional hired thugs, she realized with sick certainty. Mrs. Ravenshaw, one said, his voice muffled. Your father sends his regards. Juliana ran. She made it to the hallway before rough hands grabbed her, slamming her against the wall hard enough to make her vision blur. A cloth pressed against her face, chemical sweet smell flooding her nose and mouth. Chloroform, she thought distantly as darkness closed in. She woke to pain and terror. She was bound to a chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse, her head throbbing, her wrists raw from rope. Her father stood in front of her, his face cold with controlled rage. Did you really think you could escape? He asked. Did you really think marrying some nobody would protect you from consequences? Vincent will come, Juliana said, her voice hoarse. He'll find me. Your husband is dead, her father said flatly. There was an ambush at his meeting. A rival vampire faction decided the Vampire King was getting too powerful. Very convenient timing. Horror crashed through Juliana. You're lying, am I? Her father smiled cruelly. I've been learning interesting things about your husband these past months. About the vampire world that exists in the shadows. About how powerful creatures can be killed if you know their weaknesses. He pulled out a knife that gleamed strangely in the dim light. Silver, blessed by priests, coated in holy water. Apparently the old legends have some truth. What do you want? Juliana whispered. The ledgers. Tell me where the originals are. Give me the photographs and I'll make your death quick. Go to hell. Her father's expression didn't change. He simply stepped forward and pressed the knife against her arm, drawing a thin line of blood. Juliana screamed. We have all night, her father said, and I've learned to be very patient when extracting information. The torture lasted hours or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning in the haze of pain. Her father cut carefully, never deep enough to kill, always asking about the ledgers. Juliana refused to answer, clinging to the desperate hope that Vincent was alive, that he'd come. Then the warehouse doors exploded inward with enough force to send debris flying. Vampires poured in like a wave of supernatural death. Serafina, Casimir, Dominic, and behind them Vincent. He looked terrifying. His eyes burned crimson, his fangs fully extended, and the air around him seemed to warp with barely contained power. He moved through her father's hired thugs like death incarnate, tearing through them with inhuman speed and strength. Serafina reached Juliana first, cutting through the ropes with claws that had extended from elegant fingers. We've got you, she said fiercely. You're safe now. Vincent appeared in front of Juliana's father, who'd pulled a gun and was firing desperately. The bullets didn't even slow Vincent down. He grabbed her father by the throat and lifted him off the ground with one hand. You touched my wife, Vincent said, his voice resonating with ancient fury. You tortured her. You tried to use me as an excuse to kill her. The ambush, Juliana gasped. He said was dealt with. Vincent said without looking away from her father. Grimaldi family overplayed their hand. They're all dead now. But we'll discuss politics later. First, I'm going to kill the man who dared harm you. Vincent, Juliana said weakly. Don't. He's not worth it. He hurt you. Vincent's hand tightened, and her father made a strangled sound. He deserves death. He deserves prison, Juliana countered. I have evidence of his crimes, remember? Let the human justice system handle him. Show me you're better than he is. Vincent was silent for a long moment, clearly warring with his instincts. Then he threw her father to the ground, where Casimir immediately secured him with supernatural efficiency. You're right, Vincent said, finally looking at Juliana. His expression cracked when he saw her injuries. Oh, my love, I'm so sorry I didn't get here sooner. You came, Juliana said. That's what matters. Vincent gathered her carefully, lifting her like she weighed nothing. We're going home, Dominic. Contact our lawyers and have them deliver Mrs. Ravenshaw's evidence to the district attorney. Make sure her father faces every possible charge. With pleasure, Dominic said coldly. They left the warehouse in a blur of vampire speed. Juliana clung to Vincent, letting his presence comfort her through the shock. She was safe. He was alive. They'd survived. Back at the mansion, a doctor was waiting, a human who worked exclusively with Vincent's household, treating the occasional injuries that occurred in vampire politics. He cleaned and bandaged Juliana's cuts while Vincent hovered, his control visibly fraying. She'll heal completely, the doctor assured him. No permanent damage, though she'll be sore for a few weeks. When they were finally alone in Vincent's chambers, Juliana let herself break down. Vincent held her while she cried, his cool presence grounding her through the terror and relief. I thought you were dead, she sobbed. My father said they'd killed you. It would take more than the Grimaldi family to kill me, Vincent said quietly, though they tried. A coordinated attack at what was supposed to be a diplomatic meeting. They brought dozens of vampires, silver weapons, even human mercenaries with flamethrowers. How did you survive? By being older, more powerful, and significantly more ruthless than they anticipated. His voice was grim. I'm not proud of what I did tonight, Juliana. I slaughtered an entire vampire line, destroyed their territory, and made an example that will be remembered for centuries. I became a monster to protect you. You became what you needed to be, Juliana corrected. And you controlled yourself with my father. You could have killed him, but you didn't. That takes more strength than violence. Vincent pulled back to look at her, his crimson eyes slowly fading to their usual pale blue. How are you so strong? You were just tortured by your own father, and you're comforting me? Because you need it, Juliana said simply. And because I love you. Not despite what you are, but because of it. You're powerful enough to destroy anyone who threatens you, but you're also merciful enough to show restraint. That's not a monster. That's a good man trying to navigate an impossible situation. I love you, Vincent said, the words spilling out like a confession. I've loved you since that first night in the diner when you smiled at me despite your exhaustion. I've loved you through every moment since. You're my heart, Juliana, my reason for existing. I can't lose you. You won't, she promised. I'm here, I'm staying. And Vincent? I want to be turned. He went very still. Juliana, I know it's painful and dangerous and permanent, but I want forever with you. I want centuries to explore this love. I want to stand beside you not as fragile human but as your true equal. She took his face in her hands. Turn me. Make me yours in every way possible. Not tonight, Vincent said firmly. You're injured and traumatized. This isn't the time for a decision like this. Then when? When you've healed. When your father is convicted and you've seen justice served. When you've had time to really think about what you're asking. He kissed her forehead gently. I want this, believe me. I want you beside me forever. But I need you to be absolutely certain. Juliana nodded, understanding his caution even as impatience fluttered in her chest. 3 months, she said. Give me 3 months to heal and settle everything. Then we'll talk about this again. 3 months, Vincent agreed. Now rest. You're safe, I promise. She fell asleep in his arms, finally feeling the security of complete protection. The 3 months passed in a strange combination of recovery and transformation. Juliana's physical injuries healed, leaving only faint scars. Her father was arrested, charged with assault, kidnapping, conspiracy, and after the evidence from Juliana's photographs was reviewed, dozens of financial crimes. His trial became a media sensation, his carefully constructed respectable image crumbling under the weight of evidence. Her stepmother tried to contact Juliana once, pleading poverty and claiming ignorance of her husband's crimes. Juliana blocked her number and never responded. Some bridges were better burned. Meanwhile, Juliana was learning what it meant to be the Vampire King's consort in truth. She attended court gatherings, met with vampire nobility from other territories, and slowly began to understand the complex politics that governed the supernatural world. Serafina became an unexpected friend, teaching her vampire customs and warning her about political pitfalls. "You're good at this," the female vampire said one evening. "Better than Vincent's previous consorts. You actually care about the people, not just the power." "He had previous consorts?" Juliana asked, feeling an unexpected pang of jealousy. "Centuries ago, purely political arrangements. None lasted more than a few decades." Serafina smiled. "But you're different, everyone can see it. The way he looks at you, the way he prioritizes your safety above all else, that's not politics, that's love." "I love him too," Juliana admitted. "More than I thought possible." "Have you decided about turning?" "Yes." Juliana's voice was firm. "I want it. I want forever with him." "It's not romantic," Serafina warned. "The turning process is agony. Death and rebirth," Vincent said, "but that doesn't capture how brutal it actually is. And there's a chance it won't take. Some humans don't survive the transformation." "I'll survive," Juliana said with certainty she couldn't explain. "I survived my family. I survived torture. I'll survive becoming vampire." 3 months to the day after her kidnapping, Juliana found Vincent in his study and said simply, "I'm ready." He looked up from his work, understanding immediately what she meant. "Are you certain?" "Completely." She crossed to him and took his hands. "I want this, Vincent. I want forever with you. I want to be your true equal, not just your protected human wife. I want to stand beside you for centuries, learning and growing and loving. I'm ready." Vincent stood slowly, his expression cycling through hope, fear, and desperate longing. "Once I start, I can't stop the process. You'll die, Juliana. Your heart will stop. Your human life will end. If the turning doesn't take, you'll be truly gone." "I trust you," she said, "and I trust us. This is right. I feel it." He pulled her close, breathing in her scent like he was trying to memorize it. "I love you more than I've loved anything in 800 years. "Then prove it," Juliana said. "Make me immortal. Make me yours." Vincent led her to his chambers, the rooms they'd shared for months now. He laid her on the bed gently, then knelt beside her. "This will hurt," he warned. "More than anything you've experienced. My venom will burn through your veins, killing your human cells and remaking them. It will take 3 days, and you'll be conscious for most of it. I'll stay beside you the entire time, but I can't ease the pain." "I know," Juliana said. "I'm ready." Vincent bent over her throat, his fangs extending. "I love you," he whispered against her skin, then he bit down. The pain was indescribable. Fire racing through her veins, consuming everything human and rebuilding it into something new. Juliana screamed, her body arching off the bed, but Vincent's hands held her steady. His voice filtered through the agony, speaking to her in languages she didn't know, ancient words of comfort and love. Time became meaningless. She existed in an endless moment of transformation, feeling her body die and resurrect cell by cell. Her heart slowed, stopped, then started again with a different rhythm. Her senses exploded. She could hear conversations happening floors away, smell blood and life and death, feel the vibrations of the earth beneath the mansion. When the pain finally receded and she opened her eyes, the world was different. She could see in darkness as clearly as daylight, could hear Vincent's unnecessary breathing and the blood moving through the veins of humans somewhere in the mansion. Everything was sharper, brighter, more intense. "Juliana?" Vincent's voice was rough with fear and hope. She sat up slowly, testing her new body. Strength flooded her limbs, not just human strength, but supernatural power that made her gasp. "I'm alive," she said, and her voice sounded different even to her own ears. "Or undead, or whatever we call this." "You're vampire," Vincent said, his face breaking into a brilliant smile. "You survived. You're truly mine now." Juliana looked at her hands, watching her pale skin shimmer in the low light. Then she looked up and caught her reflection in the mirror across the room. White pale skin, eyes that flickered between their normal color and crimson, and hair that seemed to glow with an inner light. "I'm beautiful," she breathed. "You were always beautiful," Vincent said. "Now you're immortal as well." She turned to him, and suddenly the connection between them was overwhelming. She could feel his emotions, love and relief and fierce protective joy. The bond between them had deepened during the turning, becoming something permanent and unbreakable. "I can feel you," she whispered. "The blood bond," Vincent explained. "We're connected now in ways beyond marriage or law. Your thoughts, your emotions, your very existence is tied to mine." "Good," Juliana said, then kissed him with all her newfound strength. They made love again, different now that she could match his power, that she didn't have to be protected from his supernatural strength. They were equals finally, vampire king and vampire queen, bound by blood and love and choice. Afterward, lying tangled together, Vincent said quietly, "Welcome to eternity, my love." "How long do I have to master vampire abilities before I'm expected to handle court business?" Juliana asked. eager to jump into politics, eager to stand beside you properly. I'm your queen now. I should act like it. Vincent's expression softened with pride. You'll be magnificent, but we have time, centuries of it. Learn at your own pace. The first weeks of vampire existence were overwhelming. Juliana had to learn to control her strength, her speed, her predatory instincts. Vincent taught her to hunt ethically, using the vampire-run blood banks where humans donated willingly in exchange for payment. She learned to move through shadows, to use minor compulsion, to fight with supernatural efficiency. Serafina took over her political education, drilling her on vampire customs and protocols until Juliana could navigate court gatherings without insulting anyone. Casimir taught her combat, showing her how to use her new strength effectively. Dominic explained the information networks that kept vampires hidden and safe. You're a natural, Dominic said after one particularly successful court negotiation. The other territories' representatives are already treating you like you've been vampire for centuries. I had good teachers, Juliana said, but she felt proud of herself too. 6 months after her turning, the vampire lord from the Eastern Territories came to pay his respects. Lord Constantine was ancient, one of the oldest vampires in existence, and his visit was a significant political event. He studied Juliana with unsettling intensity during the formal dinner. You're the human who became queen, he said finally. I've heard stories. Stories tend to exaggerate, Juliana replied carefully. Not in this case, I think. Constantine smiled, showing fangs. You married the vampire king to escape a cruel family, not knowing what he was. Then you chose to be turned to truly join his world. That takes remarkable courage or remarkable stupidity. Perhaps both, Juliana said. Constantine laughed. I like you, Vincent chose well. Better than he did 500 years ago with that vapid French countess. Vincent, sitting beside Juliana, made a low warning sound. Constantine, we agreed not to discuss my past mistakes. Yes, ancient history. The old vampire turned serious. But I came here for more than social visits. There are rumblings in the Eastern Territories. Some of the younger vampires are questioning the old laws, challenging territory boundaries, advocating for revealing ourselves to humanity. Revealing ourselves would be catastrophic, Vincent said immediately. Humanity isn't ready. The panic and violence would destroy both our species, I agree. But the young ones don't listen to age and wisdom. They want change, excitement, power. Constantine looked at Juliana again. Which is why I think you might be key to addressing this problem. Me? Juliana asked in surprise. You bridge both worlds. You were human recently enough to remember their perspective, but you're vampire enough to understand our needs. You chose this life with full knowledge of what it meant. Perhaps you could speak to the young ones, help them understand why secrecy is necessary. Vincent's hand found Juliana's under the table, squeezing gently. That's a significant responsibility to place on someone so newly turned. She can handle it, Constantine said confidently. I've seen her navigate your court politics. She's smart, empathetic, and she understands both species. The young vampires need someone who can relate to their desire for change while explaining why caution is necessary. Juliana felt Vincent's concern through their blood bond, but she also felt his pride. I'd be willing to try, she said, if you think it would help. Over the following months, Juliana became an unlikely ambassador between generations and perspectives. She visited other territories, meeting with newly turned vampires and those who'd been changed within the past century. She listened to their frustrations, their desires for freedom from secrecy, their belief that modern humanity might accept them. I understand, she told a group of young vampires in the Southern Territories. I was human 6 months ago. I know how much the world has changed, how science and technology have advanced. But I also know that humanity fears what it doesn't understand. If we revealed ourselves tomorrow, there would be violence. Governments would hunt us. Scientists would experiment on us. Religious extremists would try to destroy us. Thousands of vampires and humans would die. So we hide forever? A young female vampire challenged. We wait, Juliana corrected. We work behind the scenes to improve human society, to reduce fear and violence, to create conditions where revelation might be possible. But we do it slowly, carefully, with patience. That's what immortality gives us, time to do things right. Her arguments were persuasive because she believed them, and because she'd lived both sides. Slowly, the unrest in the younger vampire populations calmed. Not everyone agreed with her, but enough did to prevent open rebellion. Vincent watched her work with obvious pride. You're a natural leader, he said one evening as they stood on the mansion's roof watching the city lights. Better than I ever was at your age. I had a good example, Juliana said, leaning into his side. And I'm motivated. I don't want our world to tear itself apart when we've finally found peace. Our world, Vincent repeated softly. You really see yourself as fully vampire now. Of course, this is who I am, who I chose to be. She turned to face him. Do you regret it, turning me? Never, Vincent said fiercely. You're the best decision I've made in 800 years. My only regret is that I didn't find you sooner, that you had to suffer before we met. The suffering made me strong enough to choose this life, Juliana said. If I'd been comfortable and safe, I never would have risked marrying a stranger. I never would have been desperate enough to take that leap. Fate working in mysterious ways? Something like that. She kissed him slowly, savoring the connection between them. I love you, Vincent Ravenshaw. My husband, my king, my choice. I love you, Juliana Ravenshaw, he replied. My wife, my queen, my heart. Years passed, strange to think in terms of years when centuries stretched ahead. But Juliana was still adjusting to immortal timescales. She'd been vampire for 5 years when her father died in prison. His empire collapsed, his name destroyed. She felt nothing when she heard the news except distant relief that he could never threaten anyone again. Her stepmother had disappeared, probably fled the country. Juliana didn't bother tracking her down. Some things were better left in the past. Instead, she focused on building the future. She worked with Vincent to modernize vampire laws, to create better systems for newly turned vampires, to strengthen the bonds between different territories. She became known throughout the vampire world as the queen who bridged worlds, respected for her wisdom and her ability to understand multiple perspectives. She also maintained connections to humanity, working through various charities and organizations to improve conditions that drove people to desperation. She couldn't save everyone, but she could help some young women escaping abuse, families struggling with poverty, anyone who reminded her of her own past struggles. You're making a difference, Serafina said one evening, reviewing the impact reports from Juliana's various charitable foundations. Real, measurable improvement in human lives. It's the least I can do, Juliana said. I was given an impossible gift: safety, love, immortality. I want to use it to help others find their own versions of those things. Vincent found her later in their private chambers, reading through applications for a new women's shelter she was funding. He sat beside her, pulling her close. You look thoughtful, he observed. I'm happy, Juliana said simply. 5 years ago I was serving coffee and hiding bruises, dreaming of escape but never believing it was possible. Now I'm vampire queen, married to the most powerful creature in 600 miles, doing work that matters. It's surreal. You earned every bit of this, Vincent said firmly. Your strength, your resilience, your refusal to let cruelty destroy your capacity for kindness, those are what brought you here. I just provided the opportunity. You provided everything, Juliana corrected. You saved me, protected me, loved me. You gave me choice when everyone else wanted to control me. That's not just opportunity, that's transformation. We transformed each other, Vincent said. You remind me why I fight to maintain peace, why I created laws to protect the vulnerable, why immortality is worth living. You're my purpose, Juliana. She set aside her work and turned to kiss him properly, pouring 5 years of love and gratitude into the gesture. Their bond sang with shared emotion, the connection between them stronger than ever. Forever, she whispered against his lips, forever. Vincent promised. 10 years after Juliana's turning, the vampire world faced its greatest threat in centuries. A human organization calling themselves the Order of Silver Light discovered the existence of vampires and launched a coordinated attack across multiple territories. They'd somehow obtained significant information about vampire weaknesses, safe houses, and political structures. The attack came at dawn, the human strategic advantage. Dozens of vampires were killed in their sleep, their locations compromised by information that could only have come from a vampire traitor. Vincent's mansion was hit hard. Only their extensive security, and the fact that Vincent had fortified the building beyond normal standards saved them. But several court members were injured, and 2 of the human staff were killed in the assault. This is war, Casimir said grimly as they surveyed the damage. They've declared war on all vampires. We need to find the traitor first, Dominic insisted. Someone gave them detailed information. We can't fight an external threat while dealing with internal betrayal. Juliana listened to the arguments swirling around the war room Vincent had established. Her mind was working through implications and possibilities, drawing on her memories of human psychology and motivation. It's not a vampire traitor, she said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. Explain, Vincent said. Think about the timing and the precision. This organization appeared fully formed with extensive resources and detailed information. That doesn't happen overnight. Someone's been planning this for years, maybe decades. Juliana pulled up a map on the digital display. What if the information came from vampire hunters who've been observing us for generations, compiling data slowly and carefully? Hunters don't have that level of access, Serafina objected. They do if they're patient and observant. We're creatures of habit. We use the same territories, the same safe houses, the same feeding establishments. Over decades, a dedicated organization could map all of that without any vampire noticing. Vincent's expression turned thoughtful. You think this is human intelligence gathering rather than vampire betrayal? I think we've underestimated humanity's capacity for organized threat response, Juliana said. We've been so focused on maintaining secrecy that we didn't notice humans were already noticing us. So what do we do? Constantine asked. He'd been visiting when the attack occurred and was now trapped with them until sunset. We use their tactics against them, Juliana said. We gather intelligence on them, find their leadership, their funding, their operational centers. Then we dismantle them systematically. Kill them? Dominic asked. No, Juliana said firmly. That would prove their propaganda right, that vampires are monsters who murder humans. We expose them instead. We reveal that they're a violent extremist organization attacking citizens who've committed no crimes. We turn human law enforcement against them. Vincent looked at her with obvious admiration. You want to weaponize human justice against vampire hunters. They used human intelligence gathering against us. Fair is fair. Juliana pulled up more data. I've been maintaining connections with law enforcement through my charitable foundations. I have contacts who'd be very interested to know about an armed organization committing acts of terrorism. It could work, Constantine said slowly. It's risky. We'd have to reveal some information about ourselves to make the case, but it could work. Over the following months, Juliana orchestrated a careful campaign. She fed information to law enforcement contacts about the Order of Silver Light, carefully framed to make them appear as a dangerous cult rather than revealing the vampire connection. She gathered evidence of their attacks, their weapon stockpiles, their extremist ideology. Meanwhile, Dominic's intelligence network identified the Order's leadership and financial backers. They were a mix of old money families, extremist religious groups, and individuals who'd lost loved ones to vampire attacks decades ago. Their motivation was part genuine belief and part revenge. We can't blame them for wanting revenge if vampires killed their families, Juliana said when reviewing the findings. Those were rogue vampires, criminals who violated our laws, Vincent said. I executed them myself. But their families don't know that. They just know vampires killed people they loved, and no justice was served in ways they could see. Juliana looked at him seriously. We need to address this, Vincent. Not just defeat this one organization, but create systems so humans who've been genuinely harmed by vampires have recourse. You want to reveal ourselves? Serafina asked sharply. No, but I want to create channels where humans can report vampire crimes to vampire authorities, where justice can be served in ways that satisfy both communities. We can't keep hiding forever. Eventually, humanity will figure out we exist. When that happens, we need to have proven we're not monsters. It was a radical idea, met with resistance from older vampires who'd spent centuries maintaining absolute secrecy. But Juliana was persuasive, and Vincent supported her completely. Slowly they built consensus for a new approach: limited disclosure to select humans, cooperation with law enforcement on specific cases, demonstrations of vampire justice and restraint. The Order of Silver Light was dismantled by human law enforcement within a year, their leaders arrested for terrorism, weapons violations, and murder. Their ideology was exposed and publicly condemned. A few members escaped, but without central leadership and funding, they scattered. In the aftermath, Vincent's territory implemented Juliana's proposed reforms. A confidential reporting system was established where humans could report vampire crimes to a council that included both vampire and human members. The humans were carefully chosen people who'd proven trustworthy, who understood the need for discretion, who believed in justice over revenge. It wasn't revelation, but it was progress. And other vampire territories began adopting similar systems, recognizing that Juliana's hybrid approach might be the key to long-term survival. You're changing our entire world, Vincent said one evening as they reviewed the latest implementation reports. Our world needed changing, Juliana replied. The old ways served their purpose, but we're in a new era. Humanity has technology and communication that makes total secrecy impossible. We need to adapt, or eventually we'll face something worse than the Order of Silver Light. You sound like a queen, Vincent said with pride. I am a queen, Juliana said, smiling. You're queen, and I take that responsibility seriously. 25 years after her turning, Juliana stood on the mansion roof with Vincent, looking out over the city they protected. The skyline had changed, new buildings rising, old ones being renovated, the eternal churn of human progress. But the core remained the same. Do you ever regret it? Vincent asked quietly. Giving up your human life? Never, Juliana said immediately. Being human meant being vulnerable, controlled, trapped. Being vampire means having power to protect myself and others, time to make real change, and eternity with you. How could I regret that? Some newly turned vampires struggle with the loss of humanity. I'm not some newly turned vampire anymore. I've been immortal for a quarter century. She turned to face him. And I've spent that time doing meaningful work, loving you, building something that matters. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Vincent pulled her close, and they stood together as the city lights began to flicker on against the gathering dusk. After 25 years, their bond was so strong Juliana sometimes couldn't tell where her emotions ended and Vincent's began. They were partners in every sense, politically, emotionally, eternally. I love you, Vincent said, the words familiar but still meaningful after decades. I love you too, Juliana replied. My husband, my king, my forever. In the distance, Juliana could see the diner where they'd met still operating, now with a different owner, serving coffee to tired workers just like she once had. She thought about the frightened woman she'd been, desperate enough to marry a stranger for protection. That woman had been brave, but she hadn't known true courage yet. True courage was choosing to transform, to step into the unknown with full knowledge of what it cost. True courage was building something new from the ashes of a broken past. Juliana Foster had married a poor man to escape her cruel family, not knowing the vampire king owned the city. But Juliana Ravenshaw had chosen to become the vampire queen, knowing exactly what that meant. And she'd do it again in a heartbeat. The future stretched ahead, endless and full of possibility. There would be challenges, there always were. But she would face them with Vincent beside her, with their court supporting them, with centuries of time to get things right. She'd escaped her family and found something infinitely better. A home, a purpose, and a love that would last forever. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Juliana smiled, content in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. The mansion lights below came on one by one, welcoming them home, their territory, their eternal future together. Ready to go in? Vincent asked. Ready, Juliana said, taking his hand. They descended from the roof together, vampire king and vampire queen, partners in power and love, facing eternity side by side. Behind them, the city continued its eternal rhythms, humans and vampires coexisting in careful balance. Proof that different worlds could find harmony when both sides chose understanding over fear. And in the heart of it all, a woman who'd started with nothing had claimed everything that mattered. Freedom, love, and the power to shape her own destiny forever.